She signed the deal that silenced every doubter, and the very first call she made was not to a brand executive, not to a publicist, not to a world-famous mentor. It was to the old man with a worn-out racket and a Valle Verde court in Pasig City. $10 million. Wired. No announcement, no press release. Just loyalty in its purest, most devastating form. This is the story the tennis world was not prepared to hear. This is the story of Alex Eala, the girl who reached the top and never forgot who put the racket in her hand. Before the Grand Slam titles, before the WTA rankings, before the world stopped and stared, there was a little girl on a shell court in Valle Verde Country Club in Pasig City, gripping a racket that was almost as tall as she was. She was barely 4 years old. Most children that age are learning colors and alphabet letters. Alexandra Maniego Eala was learning footwork. Her name was too long for the scoreboards then. Nobody outside her family circle would have predicted what was coming. Nobody, that is, except one man, her grandfather, Roberto Maniego, the man she called Lolo Bob. Lolo Bob was not a former tour professional. He did not have a coaching certification from a European federation. He had something far more powerful. He had patience, presence, and an unshakable belief that his granddaughter carried something rare inside her. Every morning he showed up. Every session he corrected her grip, adjusted her stance, rebuilt her swing from the ground up with the careful hands of a man who understood that champions are not born on tournament courts. They are built in the quiet heat of practice, in the ordinary moments nobody films. I remember he used to tell me, "Alex, you need to be coachable. Learn how to work with others, keep your feet on the ground." Those words, spoken by Eala years later, capture everything Lolo Bob stood for. Discipline, humility, relentless improvement. It was Lolo Bob who first saw the fire. It was Lolo Bob who fanned it before anyone else arrived with fuel. Her mother, Riza Maniego Eala, was a former national swimmer, a Southeast Asian Games medalist who understood in her bones what it meant to compete at altitude and absorb defeat with dignity. Her father, Michael Eala, a business executive, understood sacrifice. Her brother Miko, who would later play collegiate tennis at Penn State, swung rackets beside her on those same courts. Sport was not a hobby in this household. It was a language. But through every family drill, every backyard session, every early morning before school at Immaculate Conception Academy, it was Lolo Bob who was there. Constant, calm, expectant. And then came the moment that would change everything. In 2018, a 12-year-old Alexandra Eala won the prestigious Les Petites As in France, one of junior tennis's most celebrated events. The world of tennis blinked. Who was this girl from the Philippines? Where did she come from? Lolo Bob already knew the answer. That same year, she and her brother Miko boarded a plane to Mallorca, Spain. Their destination, the Rafael Nadal Academy in Manacor, arguably the most celebrated tennis development institution on the planet, a place where iron discipline meets world-class methodology, where the spirit of a 22-time Grand Slam champion breathes through the walls. When the Eala family landed at the Madrid airport for their trial week, something almost cinematic happened. On their way through the terminal, they passed Rafael Nadal himself. The family chased him down. "We're going to your academy. Can we take a picture?" And Nadal, with the easy grace of a man comfortable in his greatness, smiled and agreed. That photo, that airport, that moment, it marked the beginning of a new chapter. But Lolo Bob was still home in the Philippines, and Alex Eala would carry him everywhere she went. What does it actually cost to become a world-ranked tennis player before your 20th birthday? It costs your teenage years. It costs weekends. It costs the ordinary adolescence that most young people take completely for granted. The sleepovers, the school trips, the idle afternoons. At the Rafa Nadal Academy, Alex Eala traded all of that for something she chose deliberately and pursued relentlessly: Under coach Danny Gomez, who refined her technical foundations over 5 years of intensive work, and later under Joan Bosch, a veteran coaching mind who had worked with former world number one Carlos Moya and Spain's 2004 Davis Cup team, Eala was not simply being trained, she was being transformed. The Academy's methodology was ruthless in the best sense of the word. There was no separation between a training session and a high-level match. The pressure was constant. The standards were absolute. And within that crucible, something extraordinary happened. Alex Eala did not crack. She crystallized. Joan Bosch, the man who would eventually travel with Eala on the WTA Tour to prepare her mentally for elite competition, witnessed the moment that encapsulated everything about her character. Rafael Nadal himself, observing a young Eala struggle with her serve mechanics, picked up a racket and began hitting serves to demonstrate what she needed to fix. When Nadal finished, Bosch recalled her turning to him with wide eyes and whispering, "I can't believe it." That disbelief, that reverence, that hunger to absorb every lesson offered by every person in her orbit, that was what made her different. She graduated from the Rafa Nadal Academy in 2023 with Nadal and Iga Swiatek present at her graduation, two of the greatest players the modern game had ever produced, standing in recognition of a young woman from Quezon City who had earned her place among the world's elite. But the real examination was still ahead. In 2025, ranked outside the top 100 and wielded as a wild card at the WTA 1000 Miami Open, Alex Eala walked onto that court and proceeded to stun the tennis universe. Yelena Ostapenko, gone. Madison Keys, eliminated. Iga Swiatek, the woman considered the most dominant player in women's tennis at the time, defeated in straight sets. 3 major champions, consecutive matches, 0 sets dropped. It was not just an upset, it was a declaration. She reached the Miami Open semifinals, becoming the first Filipina to reach a WTA 1000 semifinal in history. Her ranking catapulted. The endorsements, Nike, Babolat, Globe Telecom, BPI, and Locally Juice, now carried a different weight. She was no longer a promising talent, she was a genuine force. And somewhere back in the Philippines, an old man who had once spent his mornings correcting a 4-year-old's grip watched every match. Lolo Bob Maniego had always known this day would arrive. The question nobody was yet asking, but that Eala was already answering in private, was, what do you do first when everything you worked for finally arrives? When the Miami tsunami subsided, the corporate world did not hesitate. Sponsorship conversations that had previously circled politely around Alex Eala's potential now moved with urgency. Sky Sports presenter Gigi Salmon had gone on record stating that in terms of appeal, in terms of the crowds that followed her, Eala might already be the biggest star on the WTA Tour, and brands understood what that designation meant in commercial terms. Comparisons to Emma Raducanu's post-2021 U.S. Open explosion emerged organically in the sports business world. Like Raducanu, Eala possessed something that cannot be manufactured: a story, a narrative, a face that represented not just excellence, but possibility, particularly across the lucrative markets of Southeast Asia, Japan, and the global Filipino diaspora. Her existing sponsors deepened their commitments. Nike, the brand that had signed her as a teenager and gifted her a custom Sampaguita blossom hair tie for her Wimbledon debut, later releasing a limited edition shirt designed by Filipino artist Georgina Camus, recognized that they held something rare. Babolat, who had been beside her since her junior career, continued providing her Pure Aero racket, the instrument through which she had dismantled world number ones. In February 2026, she became a brand ambassador for Milo, an iconic name across Asia, a brand synonymous with athletic aspiration for generations of Filipino children who had grown up dreaming exactly the kind of dream Alex Eala was living. Each announcement landed with cultural weight that transcended sport. Filipino sports journalist and former tennis player Diane Castillo captured the national mood when she said Eala was already being treated like a multiple Grand Slam winner. The comparisons to Manny Pacquiao, in terms of national influence, in terms of what a single athlete can do to the soul of an entire country, were not hyperbole, they were observation. Her career high ranking of world number 29, reached on March 16, 2026, made her the highest-ranked Filipino in WTA Tour history, the first Filipino to break into the top 30, the first Filipino to have multiple wins over top 10 players at tour level, a list of firsts that kept expanding with each tournament. And yet, for all the celebration, for all the brand announcements and ranking milestones and viral moments, the conversation that mattered most to Alex Eala was not happening in a boardroom or a press conference. It was happening in a much quieter space. Because while the world was measuring her worth in endorsement figures and ranking points, she was thinking about a debt that no contract could capture. She was thinking about Lolo Bob. There are moments in life that never make the highlight reel. Moments that happen off camera, in private, between two people who share a history that the outside world cannot fully access. This was one of those moments. The details, as they filtered through people close to the Eala family, described something simple and shattering at the same time. After the brand deals consolidated, after the rankings surged, after the world had fully recognized what Alex Eala had become, she sat down and thought about the beginning. Not Miami, not Manacor, not the Madrid airport where she chased Rafael Nadal through a terminal. The beginning. Valle Verde, a shell court, a little girl, and the man who showed up before anyone else did. Roberto "Bobby" Maniego had been Alex Eala's first tennis coach, not a figurehead, not a ceremonial presence, her actual first coach. The human being who held the racket steady while her hands were too small to manage it alone. The voice who corrected her footwork before footwork had any strategic meaning to her. The teacher who installed the values she would carry into every coaching relationship that followed. Coachability, humility, ground-level discipline. He did it for no money. He did it for no recognition. He did it because she was his granddaughter and he saw something in her that deserved to be shaped. And so, when Alex Eala rewarded him, she did it with the same directness she brings to every forehand winner. No hesitation, no ceremony, no announcement designed for public consumption. The gesture was between them. $10 million, transferred as both tribute and declaration. The tennis world, when word eventually spread, stopped. Because this was not a story about wealth. This was not a story about endorsement arithmetic. This was a story about memory, about what a person carries with them when the cameras are off, about who a champion credits when no journalist is present to write it down. I remember he used to tell me, "Alex, you need to be coachable." She had said those words publicly long before this moment. Now she was showing what coachability looks like when the student surpasses the teacher and chooses, freely, to return. $10 million. But the real message was in the gesture itself. I have not forgotten. I will never forget. Everything I am, you helped build. The reaction, when it spread, divided into two distinct conversations, and both of them revealed something true about how the world processes generosity. The first conversation celebrated. Fans across the Philippines, across the diaspora, across every community that had watched Alex Eala's journey with the particular intensity of people who recognize their own struggle in someone else's triumph, they understood immediately. This was not a transaction. This was testimony. This was a young woman at the height of her powers pointing backward and saying, here is where it started. Here is the person who deserves to stand beside what I have become. The second conversation asked a harder question, the kind that uncomfortable truths always generate. In a sport defined by agents, academies, corporations, and carefully managed public images, What does it mean when an athlete bypasses every conventional channel of acknowledgement and directs her gratitude to an old man with a teaching philosophy that predates everything the modern tennis industry considers essential? It means something that no brand deal can buy and no ranking system can quantify. Joan Bosch, who had traveled internationally with Eala and watched her mentally prepare for elite competition, spoke about her character in terms that now carried new resonance. He described how Rafael Nadal had once stepped in personally to correct her serve mechanics, not out of obligation, but because he recognized something worth nurturing. It was lucky, firstly, for Alexandra and then for us, Bosch said. What he meant was that people of quality attract people of quality. Lolo Bob had recognized that quality before any academy, before any ranking, before any sponsorship conversation ever began. And Eala had recognized it in him first. Her mother's background as a competitive swimmer, her father's steadiness as a business mind, her brother Miko's shared journey through the sport, all of it had created a family ecosystem where excellence was not performed for outside audiences. It was practiced in private, consistently, without applause. Lolo Bob had been the architect of that private practice. He had been the first person to hold her accountable and the first person to believe she could handle that accountability. The $10 million sent to Roberto Bobby Maniego will not appear in any official sponsorship announcement. It will not generate a Nike campaign. It will not trend on any platform managed by a publicity team. But it will reverberate, quietly, permanently, through every conversation about what kind of athlete Alex Eala actually is, beyond the rankings and the endorsements and the viral moments. She is the kind of athlete who remembers. And in a world where forgetting is easy and gratitude is inconvenient, that might be the most powerful thing about her. So here is the question worth sitting with, the one worth debating in the comments below. In an era where athletes are brands, where every gesture is calibrated for maximum public impact, where loyalty is managed rather than felt, does what Alex Eala did for Lolo Bob represent a vanishing standard or the beginning of a new one? Was this generosity? Was this justice? Or was this simply what it looks like when a champion refuses to let the world edit out the people who built her before she was worth building? Tell us what you think, because this conversation is far from finished. And if this story moved you even slightly, hit subscribe, because the story of Alex Eala is still being written, and we will be here for every chapter.